Hey everybody, Roxabox90 here with the Magic the Gathering finance speculation discussion, and this video is coming shortly after the game day weekend for Shadows over Innistrad. We've also had just a lot of stuff going on with the Pro Tour and with Standard and Shadows over Innistrad's release and so on and so forth. So that'd be a good time to kind of reset with all the big announcements that have been going on and give you guys a sense of what I think is currently going on, cards to keep in mind, themes to keep in mind, and just general thoughts overall. Starting off first is the discussion about the Pro Tour and the fact that Modern is no longer part of it. So the initial thought that comes right off the bat is, well, then what's going to happen with Modern cards? If Modern's losing Wizards support, it's not going to be as much in the public eye, it's going to be a little bit more localized. How is the format going to survive? Well, that's really, it'll come down to how big companies, how big retailers and stores support Modern. If they give big enough conventions, they give big enough competitive environments, it could still retain itself. But overall, from what I'm seeing across the market, it looks like Modern is taking a bit of a hit in terms of speculators and in terms of players. There, however, is something you can keep in mind when you're thinking about, do you want to keep your Modern cards, get into Modern, get rid of Modern? I would personally say not to just liquidate your Modern cards with this announcement. Wizards can very well, in 6 months or a year, completely pull back, and then we will have a Modern Pro Tour again. There are a bunch of things to keep in mind. So for example, cards, regardless of liquidating or not, I personally don't recommend to. I would say if you have extras lying around, maybe do that. I wouldn't recommend liquidating your whole decks, etc. But also there are cards that are multi-format, and I think that's something to keep in mind. There are Modern specific cards that have exploded because of Modern, and outside of Modern don't see as much play. But for example, Karn Liberated, he is a powerhouse card outside of Modern. Very awesome casual card. He's a card that Commander players love to death. He sees play in cubes. He's very, very well used. And so even if Modern died, so to speak, or vanished from the scene and wasn't that relevant anymore, Karn would still retain a price tag. And so liquidating Karn, for example, is a bad idea. However, there are other cards that with the Eternal Masters, Conspiracy 2, and Commander sets all coming out this year are very likely to see reprints and have kind of been pushed up because of Modern. For example, Crucible of Worlds. This card is not really a $70 card. I'm sorry, it's not. It's more because of limited printings and because the card itself is a casual favorite and does see play in some decks. That being said, this is a very, very, very likely target for a reprint, and so I would not recommend this card. If you have them, probably this is the time to start getting rid of them. Horizon Canopy, this card is not $80. I'm sorry. The fact that this is over $80 has seen consistent push up. Sure, it works well for several decks, Boggle being one example, Boggle related decks, and then it also is a card for Commander players, and it's multi-format, and it's awesome, and it's also from Future Sight, so very rare, and even with the Expedition reprint, it's not really going to matter that much. This is a card that I would recommend not. I mean, unless you're running a deck specifically needing, if you have extras lying around, this is an example of a card that's very, very likely to see another reprint and also very likely to drop in value. There are other cards that have been doing quote-unquote well, or at least initially spiked up because of Modern. You could say it's because of buyout speculation, but it's also cards that have kind of sat quietly for a while but have lots of opportunity, especially with the more broken combo decks being pushed out of Modern. So for example, Wheel of Sun and Moon is a card that is very, very effective for messing with graveyards, and the fact that it's that it works very well with the new Thopter, or newly introduced Thopter sword combo. It was very, very powerful against that. It shot through the roof. And to note, however, that it's been slowly dipping down, one, because it was probably bought out and it's not actually worth the $20 range, but also because, as we said, Modern is the announcement of the Pro Tour. This is the kind of card that is pretty much Modern specific, and as a result, we're seeing a dip come down overall. I think part of it is because of that. People realizing, oh shoot, did I push into something too quickly? And with the Pro Tour, who knows? Talisman of Progress, another card that probably Modern only is the reason this card's even got up, but as an uncommon, again, limited print runs, pretty rare, fits play for a number of Modern decks, shot up crazy, but this is a kind of card that I would not expect to hold there if Modern starts to see a dip overall. However, there are cards that, now moving beyond Modern, there are cards that when you have a look out for them that are not Modern specific at all, and in fact, moving out of Modern completely, there are cards that do very, very well. And you can kind of spot them well ahead of time. There are cards that are not likely to see a reprint, at least not, I mean, there was a reprint for Exploration, which is a very similar card to Burgeoning, for example. But Burgeoning, what happened with it is that it's very unique, very powerful effect, sees play in Commander like crazy, limited print runs, and all in all adds up to it being expensive. You remember Exploration at one point was actually in the $30s to $40 range, which is also a very similar style card. It saw a major hit from Conspiracy and the massive print run there, but regardless, the fact that this card is even holding value where it is gives you a sense that these are the kind of cards that without massive print runs, very unique effects, very powerful effects, multi-format effects, these are the kind of cards to be on the lookout for. So Burgeoning is an example. It's kind of a little late, it's already up. It could very well though rise, I think, up to $40, $50. Again, reprints really define it because Exploration, once the reprint hit, saw a major dip, so that's what I would be, and I wouldn't be as worried about these sort of cards seeing a reprint as readily as other staples, as we'll get to. For example, Ancestral Vision, perfect example. This card shot up crazy since it's been unbanned. It is a very powerful Modern card, and it does see play in other formats as well, multi-format again. But is it worth $50 in a time when the Modern Pro Tour is not really a thing? Or I don't know. My gut feeling is it's probably going to dip down to the 30s, mid 30s probably, as people try to figure out what's going on with Modern. Exactly, and it was never prior that expensive a card, so I would expect it to come down, even though right now it's just spiking. I recommend getting rid of them? No, but if you have extra copies, this is the kind of card that will fluctuate more with the Modern format than not. Tesseract Agent of Bolas, perfect example. This card's really pumped up because of Modern speculation and Modern functionality. I doubt this card's going to stay where it is. I'd probably get rid of them if you have them. Muddle the Mixture, this is a card that is, again, Modern specific. In fact, it's even more specific because it's very much for the Thopter Sword style decks that this card is even, I mean, think about it. Serum Visions is the only other common that I can find for Modern that is in this price range, and they're very similarly priced. That's crazy. That's ridiculous. It's one limited print run, and because it works well in Thopter Sword style decks, this card is ridiculously overpriced. If you have them and you're not running that deck, get rid of them because very unlikely it's going to stay. Then we have Ensnaring Bridge, all-time high. I personally got rid of mine. I mean, it works. It's an okay card, but it's very up in the air in terms of its consistency, and its price does fluctuate quite regularly. Buy, sell, personally, I got rid of mine, but this is more of an up to you kind of thing based on if you're actually using it or not. Dark Confidant at all-time low because of Modern. I would, and the multiple reprints for Modern Masters. This is the kind of card that I'd recommend picking up. At least a copy if you have for a cube, or you may want to do a cube at $40. He's more or less a steal. I don't think he's been, since Modern Masters 2, I think it's the first time he's been under $40, and in a ridiculously long time. I'd recommend grabbing one, and maybe even a playset if you have the funds. Gaia's Cradle. So the question is, what's going to go on now that we know there's a million reprints coming this year? What is going to happen with a card that is on the reserve list? Well, Gaia's Cradle gives us a little bit of an insight to that. This is the kind of card that has forever been rising. I remember personally about 10 years ago when this card was significantly low. I think my friend got one played for 20-30 bucks. Now it is at 190 median. I actually bought and or sold in the last year or two several of these, and the price range fluctuated from 130 to 170. The fact that it's up to 190 and has been more or less consistently rising over the last year in response to both demand as well as the fact that it's reserve list means this is the kind of card you should really keep your eyes on. If you don't have one, I recommend getting it now because it is not the card that's going to say reprint, and depending if enough stuff is reprinted for eternal formats, this is a card that certain reserve list cards are almost definitely going to see a push up from interest. This would be an example of one, and I've yet to regret getting my Gaia's Cradles. Okay, shifting over a bit into standard or standard spikes, partly from the Pro Tour. I know it's a little bit late for this, so in my opinion, these are the kind of things that you want to keep in mind. If you are watching the Pro Tour, do not jump in and buy unless you're a unless you're well involved in the format and well involved in the Magic finance, because there are people who will very quickly, based on literally watching a game, will manipulate prices and be able to buy and push out, resell cards very, very quickly. So for example, the Dark Petition and Seasons Past both saw some quite some public affair when they were being played. Both of them have shot up in price significantly. Personally, they're both standard focused. That's the main thing. Dark Petition of the two is probably the one you want to grab at this price. I don't see it dropping significantly. The foils, though, are usually I use foils as a basis of is this going to shoot up like crazy or not. The foils are actually fairly reasonable, and maybe even go for the foils if you can. It's only a $4 difference, but I would see the foils are probably the place where this price would rise. Seasons Past I don't see really working anywhere else. It's really just a shot in the dark, all-time high sort of situation, as far as I can tell. Same thing with Kalitas, Trader of Get, and Chandra the Flamecaller as well. Both of these are almost $30. They're not $30. They are very, very limited. They're mostly because of what's going on right now in Standard. And Standard prices are going to be very boom and bust, in my opinion. It's going to be very, very explosive when new sets arrive and when new decks are created, and then because the rotation is much faster and because Modern's not being as much supported by Wizards, I think the crashes are going to be much more painful for people. So I would be careful in terms of jumping in on some of the big hype cards like Kalitas and Chandra that work in certain fairly specific decks and are mostly based on speculation, the reason why they're so expensive. And be careful. Same thing with, I don't think I have it listed here, but maybe I do. Let me see. Yes, here I actually listed out some of the most expensive cards from Innistrad. Archangel Avacyn, for example, I don't think she's ever going to drop below $15 or so. She's just too iconic and too awesome. And this is the kind of card that right now is crazy high, but the minute it rotates out of Standard, it's going to crash and burn. As an example, this one, Sorin, Arlen Cord, and Nahiri are actually, I think they're all fairly reasonable in terms of pricing. I would actually consider getting them in this range, especially given that they are going to be in Standard for a while and they have the chance to have their big boom moments depending on the kind of decks that are going on in the new sets. As this is Innistrad Part 1, Innistrad Part 2 could very well support enough to push any of these well and above. Nahiri of them all is the one currently at the lowest. I actually think that I initially thought in terms of multi-format she would be the best, but in terms of Standard, Arlen Cord's probably going to be the one to make the biggest splash down the line. Declaration of Stone, that's a Standard only card, way, way, way overpriced for a rare. Get rid of him if you have him. Westvale Abbey, I actually like the price range for this card. I don't know if I'd recommend getting it yet. I think it could dip down a little bit lower when another 2 weeks, 3 weeks of boxes are opened. It could probably dip down to $5, $6, $7, and then maybe grab them. But I don't see this card shooting up like crazy unless it makes a massive splash in Standard, which it hasn't done as of yet. Jason Ravelry Secrets, this is a very safe buy. It's $10. He's very playable in Standard, and he could very easily find a deck in given rotation. So that's the kind of card I would keep in mind. We can go through the rest. I mean, Thing in the Ice is probably the biggest quote-unquote disappointment to me at this point. It hasn't yet gotten there, and its main splash would be in Modern if it did anything. So we'll have to see what happens with Thing in the Ice. Something to know as well, you have to admit when you're wrong sometimes. I actually didn't even have it on my top 10 list, but Cryptolith Rite did see a big jump and was way more of a speculation interest point than I had personally ever expected. But still, I did nail the Tireless Tracker, which is doing more or less on par, and that's a card that I was really a fan of. So we can go on and on. There's lots and lots and lots of cards, lots of examples, but more or less across formats, those are my initial thoughts of where things are going. Modern shifting is going to be a big shift out of the Pro Tour. We have with the push in Standard right now and the adjustment of having the 2 block a year. It's going to be very interesting to try to follow this. I'm not a regular MTG speculation guy, but I just want to get my thoughts out there on this initial shifting and generally cards that are popping out to me. What do you guys think about the whole shift? I know this video is a bit long, but I'd love to hear what you guys think down below in the comment section. If you enjoyed the video, please tap that like button. If you're new to the channel, please check in and subscribe. As always, Roxybox90 signing out. I'll see you guys next time.